Good afternoon and a warm welcome. You're watching Knowledge Plus, a knowledge sharing session with educators presented by Education Today, powered by Education News Network. Today, here we're going to discuss the National Education Policy 2020, which is going to be a wishful thought or a possible reality. And for that, we have esteemed panel of educators. Let's welcome them. So our first panelist today is Ms. Preeta Ganesh, who is the Vice President of Wales Group of Institution, a postgraduate, and she has done her Masters in Management from the London School of Economics. Ms. Preeta joined the Wales Group of Institution as the youngest Vice President, and she's currently managing 36 institutions, including K-12 and higher education in India, Singapore, and UK. Welcome, Ms. Preeta.
Thank you, Vibha.
So our next panelist, moving on to, we have Mr. Pradeep Purohit. He is the chairman of CMCL Vidya Bharati Schools and vice president for Supply Chain Star Cement Limited. He is also the chairman for Infrastructure Core, committee member CII Northeast, chairman Skill Committee CII Northeast. He is extremely passionate about education and we are delighted to have him on board. Welcome, Mr. Pradeep.
Thank you, Vibha.
Moving on to our next panelist, we have Dr. Michael Williams, who is a 25-year veteran in broadcast journalism. He graduated in English literature from the Delhi University before acquiring a bachelor's in communication from the University of Chicago, with a master's in broadcast journalism from Regent University in Virginia. He has a PhD in media and education. He worked as an executive producer with NBC in New York for 6 years, where he earned himself 2 Emmy nominations. He relocated to New Delhi and took over as a producer of News Track and Aaj Tak. He has done cricket commentary on Doordarshan before entering into education field. He was the senior editor and senior anchor on Times Now. Today we welcome him as the Dean of the Mount Carmel School, New Delhi.
Thanks,
welcome, sir.
Thank you, Vibha. Good to be on board with you.
Yes, sir. Next we have, last but not the least, we have Dr. Alpa Katodia, who is the founder and director principal for Vapi Public School. Her expertise include conducting workshops on leadership management, principles, emotional stability of students, parents, teachers, and women empowerment programs and enhancement for teachers and students' performance. She is the receiver of Shiksha Bharati Award, Rashtriya Shikshan Samman Award, and Excellence School Leadership Award. Welcome, Dr. Alpa.
Thank you, Vibha. Thank you so much.
So, beginning with our discussion today, let's begin with Ms. Preeta Ganesh, who is the Vice President of Wales Group of Institution for India, Singapore and UK. Ms. Preeta, what's your view on the National Education Policy 2020, a wishful thought or a possible reality? What do you think? What's your take?
First of all, I would like to say good afternoon to everyone. And at this outset, I would like to thank Education Today and Ms. Vibha for providing me with this opportunity. Now, getting into the topic, the NEP 2020 is in many ways just what India needs as it blossoms into the world's largest workforce in the coming years. To realize the dreams it contains, we must overcome substantial execution challenges in a sustained manner for the decades to come. In my opinion, the major challenges in the implementation of NEP fall under 3 broad categories. Firstly, the feasibility of enrollment goals, secondly, funding, and thirdly, the much required cultural shift in the Indian education system. First and foremost, the NEP has stated that doubling the gross enrollment ratio in higher education by 2035 as one of its goals. India today has around 1,000 universities across the country, and this means that we must open one new university every week to attain this goal for the next 15 years, which is again a very Herculean task. Similarly, the numbers are no less daunting for reforms in our school education system as well. Secondly, funding is a big challenge in the COVID era. The current focus for the government is on healthcare and economic recovery, and education will take a backseat temporarily. The NEP expects an increase in the GDP spending on education from 4.6% to 6%, and this difference itself amounts to around 2.5 lakh crore rupees per year. This money will be spent on building schools and colleges, appointing teachers and professors, and on operational expenses such as providing free breakfast to students as such. And what makes things tricky in this situation is that the policy has come into being at a time when the economy has been battered by COVID, and we will be off to a stumbling start for the next 2 to 3 years at least. And finally, and most importantly, is the need for training our teachers. In school education, the policy envisages a sweeping structural redesign of the curriculum, and this is a very welcome step. However, in order to make this possible, we will need teachers who are effectively trained in and understand pedagogical needs. Many of the curriculum changes require substantial changes in the mindset of the teachers as well as parents. So I would like to conclude by saying that although the NEP is very progressive and welcome, the devil, however, lies in the implementation, and that requires complete cooperation of central and state governments, institutions, and individuals. The expected transformation can materialize and become a possible reality if we can do the following: create more equal socio-economic opportunities in terms of access to education, change the culture of educational institutions, regulators, and governments, and end the political intrusions that currently exist in every sphere of education. Without these, I think NEP 2020 will still remain a wishful thought and a distant dream. Those are my thoughts. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Preeta. That was really short and crisp for all our viewers. Quickly moving on to our next panelist, Mr. Pradeep Purohit, who is the chairman of CMCL Vidya Bharati School. So, what would your thought process be on the NEP 2020? Do you think it's a wishful thought or a possible reality?
Well, thank you, Vibha and ENM for having me on this panel to discuss the most important and pertinent topic today. We are really happy that the NEP is finally in place and we are looking ahead to implementation. We are thankful to the government for taking some bold and path-breaking steps through this policy. The changes that are brought in are very big and will really need Herculean efforts from each stakeholder. This is not going to be an act of law like GST or any other act of law which is brought in and then it is passed and a particular date is finalized for implementation and everybody starts following it. Through this, we are going to transform the entire education system gradually over a period of time. But certainly there are some points which we all need to realize and understand in order to make it a reality on the ground. First thing that needs to be discussed is the resources that are needed to make it a reality. We are talking of making education to contribute 6% of our GDP. Currently, this is around 3-4%, and our education system at mass level is largely dependent upon government spending. India spends over 11% of its total government spending on education. Even at the current level of 3-4% of GDP, if we really want to achieve 6% GDP, then and we also say that the fee structure will be kept in control, and then from where this money is going to come, where from these resources are supposed to be coming in. Are we going to allocate over 20-25% of our government spending to education? Far-fetched. We are aware of the state of affairs of the LP and ME schools that are already operating. We are not even able to provide them proper classrooms. The task in hand, or so to say, expectations are really steep. Next, in this policy revision have come after a gap of 34 years. Last revision was in 1986. During these years, the world has entirely changed twice or thrice in respect to what skills are needed in a college pass out. The process of drafting this policy took 6-7 years. While we have come up with these changes, we have already agreed that the next review will be done after 2014. in the roadmap itself, we are mentioning that once by 2040 we'll be having the entire implementation done, and then the next review will be done. In my opinion, the policy must have mechanism inbuilt to make things more dynamic and not left on some government or political decisions after 2040 to initiate further changes as per future needs. Some good things: school complexes and SEZs is a great initiative. Through this policy, this move will certainly make better use of resources and will make quality education affordable. Training and development of existing teaching staff, especially the government and government-aided schools, is going to be another big challenge. We really need to make very good use of technology and online training sessions to ensure development in this direction. 360-degree assessment process requires a competent and collaborative contribution from each stakeholder. From this, we also need to incorporate 360-degree assessment of teachers and allow students to get some participation in the process. That will ensure quality of education to continuously improve. My advice to all schools is not to wait for the deadlines. There are so many aspects of the policy which can be at least initiated by us in our schools immediately to make the transition smooth. We all stakeholders are having a very big responsibility at hand to make things possible and happening on ground. My best wishes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Pradeep. Thank you so much for your input. That was wonderful. Moving on to our next panelist for today is Dr. Michael Williams, who's the Dean of Mount Carmel Schools, New Delhi. So, Dr. Michael, tell us, what is your viewpoint on this?
Vibha, thank you for having me on this. Let me start by very briefly mentioning some of the good things that I like, because both the other panels also mentioned some of the nice things. Do we like the fact that there is a 4-year, 9, 10, 11, 12 combined where a child can study in it? Yes, we love it. That's how it's done all over the world. And so now a child will not be blocked into science or commerce or arts. I think that's very progressive. That is very nice. That we are trying to get the Harvards and Oxfords into India and trying to make sure Indian students have access to a lot more colleges and a lot more universities which are needed at an emergent pace. Yes, that is good. I agree with that. But if you would also have sensed with both of the people who spoke before me that they voiced certain concerns. And these concerns are very important for us to understand. Even though Purohitji mentioned that after 1986 it is the first vision, I must tell you that in the last 4 years, this government has taken out 6 versions of the education policy. It is important for us to understand why the only government in the history of governance of India that has had such a haste in trying to implement an education policy, which technically is still a state subject even though it's on the concurrent list, is important for us to understand. You see, this policy, as Pratibha mentioned, came out during the time of COVID when everything is shut. Schools physically are shut. Children are at home. This has not even been cleared by the Parliament of India and it doesn't have constitutional mandate. But here it is upon us and we are now talking about it. So areas that I must say of concern for me are that on 29th July when the government announced the education policy saying this is the policy that we have, here it is on our website. I downloaded it like everybody else over here would have and I studied it. On 6th of August, when I went to download a fresh copy, it had completely changed. This 60-page document had become a 66-page document. Some areas that I had pointed out and marked had been removed. Language had been very subtly changed. Government statistics themselves were changed. So one doesn't understand why this happened. For a document that has been approved, there should normally be an index that accompanies it saying these are the changes that have been made. Now Article 2 may be read with this. None of those things appear. But in the high school education part, which comprises of 146 paragraphs, 135 have been edited. So there is an area of concern. Who is the author of this document? We don't know. All we know is that in 2016, the very first national education policy that had come out under Mr. T.S.R. Subramaniam, that we would all remember, it was something like this. This was the only document that the government of India had sanctioned. All the stakeholders were taken, interviews were done. But this has been set aside. What has emerged now in the following 5 documents is a language that we must be keen and sharp to understand. This policy talks about the time when education was good in India during the time of Nalanda and all the great universities that we had. And it completely leapfrogs over all other education that happened subsequently and comes to the modern times. Like Pratibha said, this policy is going to help create a workforce. This is not going to create leaders. We are trying to make sure we have equipped workforce in India. That's an area of concern for me. When this policy says retired pedagogy will be now based on Indian culture, Indian heritage, and Indian knowledge, I have to take caution that perhaps the word Indian over here may be a substitute for the majoritarian religious thought process. Because Gordon Mull, who is recognized as the very first finance minister of India, his policies on taxation, his policies on land measurement, none of those things find many mention over here. The beautiful architecture of the Mughals, of the Rajputs, none of that finds mention over here. The great schools and colleges that were set up by missionaries and other Christians that came in 1800s, 1900s, that brought about things like democracy, the ability to govern ourselves, that education is meant for all, girl and boy, no matter of what caste. All of these things we have completely thrown out, whitewashed, and not even recognized. We are only recognizing something that happened 4,000, 5,000 years ago, but for which there is very little historical documentation that we have. So these are areas of concern for me. Another area of concern for me is that this policy says with immediate effect, all private B.Ed institutions must be shut. If you are going to must be shut something, then you must be open with that same immediate ability. But it doesn't do that. It takes all the way, like just now Professor Purohit was saying, 2040, 2035 is when it gives time for B.Ed institutions to merge completely with universities, but it asks for all of those to be shut down now. So I am concerned that perhaps the entire layout within this policy has not been thought out correctly. So for us educators to implement something which hasn't been thought out is quite drastic. When we are talking about tethering private schools and public schools and creating a school complex, as a school owner, am I responsible for all the other school children who will come into the property, who may get injured, who may cause damage? Where is all of this liability? How do we differentiate? It sounds good to have let everybody share what we have together concept, but it doesn't work in India. One shoe size does not fit, which is why education has been a state subject. Places like Uttarakhand, places like Manipur, which are remote villages up in the mountains. This policy says all of these schools with less than 30 children must be shut. It can't happen in these villages. Those are the only schools they have. The next school may be 40 kilometers away. So I have some areas of concern with this policy. There's lots more, but I just wanted to share some of these in a much broader picture. Good luck.
Thank you so much, Dr. Michael. We are really now, really addressing those concerns which probably a lot of people have not really, gone through it or something like that. Moving on to our next panelist, we have Dr. Alpa Katodia, who is the founder and director principal for Vapi Public School. Ma'am, what's your take on this?
Yeah. Yes. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am. You're audible now.
Yeah. I would like to say the change is definitely required in the education system, but the way it is brought right now, just the policy, without any supporting scheme of procedures, training, it is really, I'm worried that how we are going to implement. And I agree with all the 3 panelists before who shared their views. that it's really tough time, and looking at the things like what happens in foreign countries is going to be brought here. Definitely there the population is less, the training part is more, and here we require all these things, and we have a huge population, as Mr. Michael said, Dr. Michael just said, that we have small villages, how we are going to work there. And this is really an area of concern, and as educators, we all are concerned, but let us wait how it comes, the SOPs or like that. And we have to be positive for this to implement. And maybe when we come all together, we will be able to bring a little change. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Alpa. Moving on to one question that we have for Ms. Preeta. What do you think the enrollment goals that are relating to the school education, are they feasible enough?
So according to the enrollment as per schools, the NEP aims to bring about 2 crore children who are not currently in the education system back to schools. This means that we'll have to open around 50 schools every week, and not only that, we'll have to appoint 50 headmasters and nearly 200 to 300 teachers too every week. And this I don't think is quite feasible, considering that even positions now go unfilled in existing schools. This becomes a particularly interesting challenge, according to me.
Also, Preeta, you just spoke about the cultural change when you just talked about the NEP 2020 sometime back. So what kind of cultural change would be required with respect to the higher education?
So with regards to higher education, the NEP suggests more interdepartmentalized and multidisciplinary approach. Traditionally, universities in India have been very siloed and departmentalized. To recruit and make professors both experts in their own fields, while also being curious and research interdisciplinary things as well, is going to be a very interesting challenge. And I think in the next 15-20 years, that culture has to seep in slowly.
Thank you so much, Preeta, for that. Moving on, we have a question for Dr. Michael Williams. Dr. Michael, you just said that there are several concerns that you raised in the NEP 2020. What is that one particular concern, if we say, that this is a major concern in the NEP 2020 that you have? What would that one concern be?
Well, like you said, there are several, but if I can talk about one, the fact that this document does not have an author. As educationists, it's very important for us to know who has written, who has authored, what is the thought process. I came across a document when I was researching 3 years ago on the NEP, and this is a document called the Final Vision NEP Policy Document, released by the Indira Gandhi National Tribal University in Amarkantak. Now, I hold this up because this 400-page document actually was the mother source of the government booklet that came on air in 2016 called Some Inputs for Draft National Policy. It was a word-for-word lift from this document. If everybody can recall this Amarkantak University, this is where about 4 years ago the 60-foot statue of a god was put, and now it is the unofficial RSS headquarters. This document comes from there. The Vice Chancellor of this university happens to be one of the authors of the National Education Policy that was released in 2019. Now, when you read this policy that we have today, I will just take you to one passage. It talks about something called the Ek Bharat Shresth Bharat. And it says education will follow the pedagogy of the Ek Bharat Shresth Bharat method. And it is on page 14 of our national education policy. But nowhere in the definition or nowhere are we told what is the Ek Bharat Shresth Bharat initiative. I looked everywhere, don't find it. But when you come back to this Amarkantak document of 2014, there is a 40-page chapter which is dedicated to nothing but introducing a concept called the Ek Bharat Shresth Bharat. And so this document still happens to be the keystone foundation for this particular NEP that we have. And this puts education of India into four things. Under the Ek Bharat Shresth Bharat, it is a four-tier architecture. First, ethic view, the physical view, view, and the user view. And they say under these four views should the education policy move along. So for me, this is an area of concern. If you're going to make Sanskrit mandatory from nursery onwards, then you will need Sanskrit teachers. Delhi has 4,000 schools, and every school will need at least 10 Sanskrit teachers. You're looking at 40,000 Sanskrit teachers that Delhi will need. If we talk about the rest of the country, you're looking in lakhs for just one subject or just one aspect of the NEP. Pratibha is absolutely correct, but she says, where are these teachers going to come from? When you're shutting down B.Ed institutions.
Dr. Michael, I'd like to correct you here. She's Miss Preetha.
Yes, sorry. I'm sorry. Ms. Preetha, I apologize. Well, she's right. This is an area of concern for us. We don't have these sort of teachers available. And if I was to ask you to dig a little deeper and say, if you need 2 lakh Sanskrit speaking certified people, I can tell you from which particular Shakha they might be coming into our schools to monitor what we are doing. It's a scary thought process to see what is happening behind the architecture of what is written quite innocently. So this is an area of concern for me, that the authorship of this document, the mother source of this document is completely questioned.
Thank you so much, Dr. Michael. On that note, we'll move. We have a question for Mr. Pradeep Purohit. Sir, you were talking about the shift in education policy. So, what, as per you, is a major shift in the education policy with regards to the school education?
The most major is the pedagogical changes and the framework and the curriculum that is being changed. And the other big changes are like doing away with the rote learning and coming to scientific and analytical learning, pure examinations, incorporation of vocational training, flexible choices in courses, like no rigid separation in streams in higher education, the special education zones,
Absolutely.
the development of students' approach, and the 360-degree assessment. These are the major changes that are taking place, and some of them are very good changes. But as we are all echoing on the only one problem, and that is how is all going to get implemented, and where is the entire mechanism available for implementing it, or where are the resources available to implement it on ground. That is a big challenge that we are having at hand, and a lot needs to be clarified before we really start working on that.
Absolutely. On that note, Dr. Alpa, could you just tell us that the NEP stresses on the importance of giving a solid foundation course from the age of 3 to 8 years old? What is your opinion on mother tongue as the medium of language for students at that age?
Yes, like mother tongue, I think that's very important. Children learning their mother tongue, because this is an ability which they get like with the birth, and we don't need to teach them. They learn it by listening, and they can just inculcate their thoughts into the writing pattern, because they are trained in the mother tongue. Now, mother tongue, when a child learns, it's like drinking the mother's milk, They don't have to be trained for that. It's so easy for them. And if children are taught in a mother tongue, definitely they will be developing socially, culturally, emotionally. But I think this is not possible everywhere, because, in our, children are from different states, transferable job, cosmopolitan cities we are having. So their children cannot be taught in mother tongue itself. And I recommend that it should be more like native language, national language, rather than mother tongue. Because national language will be able to...
No, I'd like to interrupt interrupt you here, Dr. Alpa, where we see that the small town people have a tendency that, they send their child to an English medium school. The finicky of learning English is very, very important these days. And where the NEP comes up with something like this, where the mother tongue can be used till a particular grade, won't it be difficult for the child to grasp another language? What do you say, Dr. Michael, on this?
Yeah.
I think you're both bang on correct. The older version of the NEP that Mr. T.S.R. Subramanian had taken out, he had stressed very clearly that from nursery to 12th, English is a must. Every child must be taught English if you want to be a global player. The internet is in English, business is conducted in English, we are talking in English. The knowledge of English is so crucial if you want to be world players.
So isn't it a conflict of interest that the NEP has brought in the mother tongue option?
Completely a conflict. Just like Dr. Alpa was saying, mother tongue is something that comes very naturally to the child. But the NEP is talking about reinventing the wheel, saying words that don't exist, scientific technologies and terms don't exist. We will create them in the mother tongue. Why? It's all there in English. We all speak in English. India, every child needs to learn English. I think this policy has completely got it wrong when it comes to its language policy. It is completely absurd.
Absolutely. Dr. Alpa, do you want to throw some light on that?
Yeah, because when we say that a child has to be a global citizen, global child, they should learn the international language, right? And till now we find that English is the international language which is understood by the people of different countries. So definitely I feel that teaching in mother tongue or only in the regional language is going to be really tough, and parents are really concerned about it, that how children are going to excel, because we are making them in a soup. So I wish that NEP take some changes or bring some changes. Definitely NEP says that it is allowed for the schools to use the language what they are continuing, but introducing the mother tongue or any regional language is going to be difficult, because we have children from different states studying in our schools.
Thank you so much, Dr. Alpa. On that note, we will be opening the forum for the questions from our viewers. So we've received around 25 questions as of now, but because of the timing constraint, we would be taking only the top 3. So we have Miss Priyanka from the Guardian School, Maharashtra, who has sent us a question. She says, do you think the policy brings any similarity to the Swedish model of schooling, as they are considered to be the best? Ms. Preeta, you would like to answer this?
Sure. So I think in Sweden, the classes are very friendly, and there's no pressure, and education is, I think, provided by the country. So as we nationalize and make it more, centralized, I think that's what the NEP is also trying to do.
Okay. Our next question is sent by Ms. Jyoti Das, again from Maharashtra, and she says that reduction in syllabus to all the grades, is it beneficial to students or not? Dr. Michael, would you like to answer that?
So that's an interesting question. You see, it is already happening this year. Because of COVID, all of us are reducing our syllabuses in a tremendous manner. Is it good? Is it bad? Only time can test and tell. You see, we have a redundancy and growth factor because year on year, certain topics are taught. In economics, we are taught microeconomics at 2-3 different levels. Biology, certain are carried across year on year. In civics, Indian democracy, the notion of it, yes, it grows bigger, it grows richer year on year as the child grows. I understand that. But is there room to reduce the syllabus in India? I think there certainly is. If we are looking to create a society where our children can have the ability to play music, paint, dance, be athletes, and be holistic in their growth, then the pure academic content of it will have to be reduced. so that there is room within a child's life for all of these things as well.
Thank you so much, Dr. Michael. Last question for today is, from which year do you think will be the implementation of this policy? Mr. Pradeep, would you like to answer that? We have Ms. Ashwini who's asked this question.
As far as the implementation, there is a schedule already given with the policy, and it is a phased implementation that is going to take place. But still a lot of things to unfold before the real dates are coming out to us and real dates are available to us for implementation. But there is a calendar already provided for each phase of implementation along with the policy itself. What we need to do at this point of time, or our advice at this point of time, is that why wait for those deadlines? Let us start implementing some of the things which we can right away implement, and start making ourselves aligned to the policy as much as possible even before the implementation starts.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mr. Pradeep, for that input. On that note, we come towards the end of the session. But before ending the session, we have a lucky winner amongst us who's asked the question here, and our system has randomly picked up a name. She's Miss Jyoti Das from Gordian School, Maharashtra, and congratulations, Jyoti, and you've won yourself 1 year online subscription, the portal subscription, which is worth 10,000 rupees, which includes 1 year complimentary listing of your school, exclusive dashboard to update the events and achievements of the school, a complimentary write-up, admission inquiries, and more. Also, I would take this opportunity to thank all our panelists who made this session wonderful and brainstorming for all our viewers, which is because we've got 3,000 plus views on YouTube right now live, 1,000 plus views on Facebook, and the ENN channel around 4.5 thousand views. So thank you so much, all our viewers, for all the support and love that you have given us for making the show a massive hit. Do not forget to log on to TheENN.com for more such interesting conversations on the current topics. And also do not forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe the YouTube channel for Education Today. For now, signing off, Vibha Raj. Thank you, panelists. It was wonderful talking to all of you.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.